Hey, Kylan with Fourth Bikes here, and today we are going to go through a super basic bike tune-up for our kids' bikes as we get them ready for the spring and summer riding season. Now, as a dad of 4 riding kids myself, I always want to make sure my kids' bikes are safe and ready for the type of riding that we're going to be doing. And a big part of that is making sure that I myself am familiar with how to tune up their bike and keep an eye out for things that may need adjusting as we continue to ride. I have my 9-year-old daughter's 4th 24-inch X2. This bike is a 10-speed mountain bike with hydraulic disc brakes. And my 5-year-old's 4th 16-inch park bike. This bike is a single speed bike with standard V brakes. The bikes that I'm tuning up today may be a little bit different than what you're looking at home, depending on the type of bike your child is riding. But my goal is to give you enough of a base knowledge so that you have at least a general idea how to fix up your bike. Now, even for me, there are a lot of parts on a bike that I'm pretty unfamiliar with. Because of this, I have a great relationship with our local bike shop. I am always asking them questions, taking our bikes in to have them look at different parts, components. Maybe we have issues that come up, but I really encourage you to establish a relationship with your local bike shop. That's always a great resource, and it's something that you should do regardless of what type of bike you ride, what brand of bike you ride. Knowing your local bike shop is always a great idea. They are professional bike mechanics, and they will always know how to keep you and your children safe on bikes. There are a variety of tools and items that you may need during a basic bike tune-up. It will vary depending on what your bike needs. However, I always suggest having a set of metric Allen wrenches. I actually have a handy multi-tool which has a variety of Allen wrenches on it. Multi-tools are a great thing to invest in, so if you are a biking mom or dad, or if you're getting into biking in general, I definitely suggest having one of these in your pocket during bike rides. I have them in my cars, in my nightstand, and there's always one in my pocket. This is almost as valuable as my phone. You'll also be needing a 15mm wrench, a standard floor pump or hand pump to pump up our tires. Having a pressure gauge is something that can be valuable, especially if you're wanting to really hone in your PSI. It's not needed, but it's definitely something for a tune-up. It would be recommended. And for a bike tune-up, especially if the bike's been sitting in the garage all winter, it's a good idea to have some chain lube. We do suggest that you use bike-specific chain lube. We buy our bike lube directly from our bike shop. It works great. It's something that I keep handy, and we actually apply many times throughout the riding season as well. The first thing I like to do getting started is actually give the bike a good wash. When washing your bike, it not only helps get the bike looking good and clean, it also gives us an opportunity to eyeball the bike kind of wheel to wheel and just give it a visual check to make sure there's nothing out of ordinary or looks like it may be an issue. The next thing I like to check are the brakes. Now, on this hydraulic disc brake bike, we have a front and rear brake. And so what I like to do to get things started actually is just give the bike a roll and test one brake out at a time. So I'll give the bike a roll and pull the back brake. We can see that it's locking up fairly easily. Even when I give it some good pressure, that brake is holding pretty well. So we know that brake's working good. Same with the front. We can see as I push, it's lifting up the back. That is a good thing. It means our brakes are working good. And being an adult, you can push a little more into it and really make sure these brakes are really gonna work when your child reaches for them and they need them. Now with the V brakes, we're gonna do the same exact test and it should work just the same. I'm squeezing this brake all the way down to the bar, and as you can see, it's not even stopping the bike. This is a potentially dangerous situation for your child because we want to make sure those brakes are working. We don't want them to be going down a hill or riding into traffic and not being able to pull their brake. The front brake, same thing. So with V brakes, there's a number of things that we can do to adjust the brakes. V brakes basically work with tension. It's mechanical, and so we have the cable that's routed to our lever, and as we pull the cable, we can see it is pulling tension on the brake arms, which squeeze in our brake pads. In this situation, both the front and the rear brakes are a little loose. So we're actually gonna take the bike up onto the stand, we're gonna look a little bit closer to see how we can adjust these brakes and get them working properly. So we know that this front brake is not performing as it should. So what I like to do is first give it a visual inspection. So we're gonna just follow the cable all the way down. We can actually see right here as the cable dives into what is called the noodle, the brake cable housing is actually sitting outside of the noodle. So this little end of the brake cable housing needs to sit inside. But as we can see, everything else looks good visually. So from here, there are two different places that we can look to make an adjustment to the tension on the cable itself. The first is actually up here next to the lever. This is called our barrel adjuster. The barrel adjuster can be twisted clockwise or counterclockwise to adjust the tension of the cable. And the second is actually down here on the end of the brake arm itself. The cable comes through the two arms and out this side. And here we have our slack from our brake cable. This bolt right here holds the cable tight. And if we loosen this, we can adjust how much cable is pulled through to give us another adjustment point for the brake tension. First, we're gonna start up here at the barrel adjuster. To start with the barrel adjuster, we need to loosen the bolt that holds the barrel adjuster in place. Once we've backed that off a little bit away from the brake lever, we can actually turn the barrel adjuster counterclockwise. As we turn this, it's backing out the barrel adjuster away from the lever, which is putting additional tension on the brake cable. What I like to do is give it 2 or 3 turns and then give the brake a test. So as you can see here, just with the force of my hand, I've got the lever pulled completely in and I'm still able to move the tire in and out. So we need to make an additional adjustment. So in this situation, you don't want to go too far or else you actually back the barrel adjuster all the way out. So what I'm actually gonna do is gonna put it back in a few spins. We're gonna tighten our bolt that holds it in place, and we're actually gonna focus our tension down here to the slack on the brake cable for our adjustment. For this particular bike, I'm gonna need my multi-tool here with my Allen wrenches, and I'm gonna use a 5mm to back this bolt out. We don't wanna back it out too far to where you lose the cable through the end. You also want to pay attention to where the brake arm was previously sitting on the brake cable itself. So in this situation, we need to tighten the tension of our brakes. So I'm actually going to pull more cable through the end. We're going to tighten this back up. And what this did is should have put a little bit more tension on the brake, which brought the brake arms and brake pads closer to the rim of the tire. So now as we test this, you can see we're getting a little bit more tight. That being said, it's still not tight enough for it to be a safe ride. So I'm gonna do just one more adjustment. We're gonna do about the same amount. In addition, tighten that back up. And now we should see that is holding. I can't even spin it with my arm when I'm holding the lever all the way down. The same applies for the rear wheel. We're gonna do the same exact thing. First an inspection, then we're gonna check the barrel adjuster up top, and if that still doesn't solve our problem, we're gonna adjust the tension of the cable down here off of the brake arm. So now our brakes are tight. I feel confident that my 5-year-old daughter would be able to pull these levers in enough to stop her safely as she rides. Next, we're moving on to the tires. We're gonna give them a visual check, make sure there's enough traction for this next riding season, as a pressure check to make sure there's enough air in the tires. So first, just a visual check. I like to look through and make sure the tread all looks good and there's nothing out of the ordinary. Sometimes if your child likes to skid a lot, they will wear down their rear tire. For most bikes, you can rotate tires just like on a car to try to extend the life of the tire a little bit. But if the tire is worn down pretty well, especially depending on the type of riding you're doing, you definitely want to get the tire replaced. If you're starting to see the threads from inside the tire, that is a for sure sign to replace your tires. So make sure your kids are riding on good tires. So the tread looks good on this bike. Now we're gonna give it the weight test to just kind of see if we can feel if there's enough pressure in the tire. Starting with the front, I can tell I'm getting a little give, but with this particular tire, that is a good sign. I'm putting a good amount of weight on here and it's not giving out very much. We're gonna move to the back. You can see in the back, there's a little more give, and yep, as I push on with my hand, you can see that it definitely gives way a little bit more. So this tire definitely needs some air. Let's grab our floor pump and add some air to this tire. So all of our Fourth bikes come stock with Schrader valve tubes. There are two types of tubes used on bicycles, Schrader and Presta. Schrader are standard, similar to your car vehicle, and Presta are a little bit different. This pump actually can fit on both nozzles. You just want to pay attention to what kind of tubes you have in the garage and make sure that you have a pump that fits those tubes. You may be asking, how much air or pressure do I put in my kids' tires? On every single bike tire, you'll see on the outside, printed right on the tire, there's an inflate 2, and it gives you a range for your PSI. On this particular tire, it says 40 to 65 PSI. So what that tells me is I know anywhere in between 40 to 65, I have a good amount of pressure on here. I don't want to go above that because you risk bursting the tube inside, and going beneath that, you're either going to risk folding the tire over and losing traction, or potentially getting a pinch flat, which means the tire squished so much that it pinched the tube against the rim of the tire, and now you have to deal with a flat tube. The type of riding that your children are doing is going to dictate where in that range you want to fill it up to. When you're riding more trail and dirt and need a little bit more traction because there's some variety in the surface that they're riding on, sometimes I like to go on the lower end of that pressure. If you're riding more on cement or roads or hard pack, then it's good to go on the higher end because you don't necessarily need your tire to kind of mold around the surface as much. In this situation, I'm going to go right in the middle to 55 PSI. Now my floor pump has a built-in pressure gauge, which makes it handy because I know I can just pump until I get to my desired level, and then stop. If you don't have a gauge built into your pump, you may need to pump a little bit and then check the tire and repeat until you reach your desired pressure. All right, our tire's all filled up with air. Our wheels and tires are good to go. All right, next we're gonna move on to the chain. The chain is what drives our wheel. We have our chain ring up front, which takes the pedal power, gives it to the chain, and comes back to the cogs in the back, which actually drives the wheel. Especially if the bike's been sitting all winter, we want to make sure that our chain is well lubricated and free of debris that may make it difficult to pedal the bike, as well as break down some of the other components. One common mistake is actually cleaning the chain too much. It is a good idea to make sure that your chain is free of dirt and debris. That being said, we do want to make sure that the chain is still lubricated. Having a dry chain could cause significantly chain and drivetrain noise. It also could wear down the other components associated with the drivetrain. What I like to do first is actually just rub my fingers along the chain here. If your fingers come up dry, it means your chain is probably too dry. If your fingers come off dirty, it could mean that there previously was a little bit too much lubricant left on the chain when ridden, and it collected debris and dirt. In this situation, our chain is actually pretty dry, so what we're gonna do is add some lubricant. I picked up some standard lubricant from our local bike shop. You can use a number of chain lubricants. Just make sure that you are using lubricant made for bike chains. There's a lot of different types of lubricant out there, and sometimes people actually damage their bike tires, not realizing they're using the wrong kind of lubricant. Applying the lubricant, you just want to spin the wheel gently here and just let the lubricant kind of drip onto the chain itself. You don't really need to overdo it. Just want to make sure that there's just a general amount getting into the bearings of the chain itself. And I just go a couple rotations, a couple cycles through the chain, and then just give it a little bit of spin. You don't need to lubricate your drivetrain, any of your cogs, or the chain ring itself. You just need to lubricate the chain. So as you can see, we've got the chain fully lubed. And then as instructed on our bottle of chain lubricant here, we want to let it sit for a few minutes, and then we're actually going to wipe off the excess lubricant that's left on the chain to help prevent it from actually collecting dirt and debris as we go for our next ride. Now that we let this lubricant work its way into the chain, I'm just going to hold a shop rag here under the chain and just let it pick up any excess lubricant that may be left on the chain itself. And now you can hear we've got a nice smooth chain running as it should. Now on this mountain bike we do have gears, so we're going to cycle through the gears and make sure that the chain is going through the gears without any problems. Sometimes if the gears do get hung up, there are adjustments that we may need to make to the derailleur. We're not gonna cover that in this video, but this will be another video that we'll have available on our support page. This is also something that is a little more technical that may not be a bad idea to ask your local bike shop about. The gears on this bike look good, so we're gonna move on. And lastly, we're actually gonna do a wheel-to-wheel inspection of all the bolts on the bike and everything else that we can physically grab with our hands. I like to grab the grips, make sure the grips aren't spinning and are tight. Check the seat, make sure the seat is tight as well. You actually take your Allen wrench or multi-tool and go through all the different bolts on the bike and make sure they're tight. As your kid is getting older and you're moving on to a new biking season, your child is not only going to be putting more weight on the bike, but they also could be riding their bike more aggressively. Because of this, what previously was tight enough on some of these components could not be the case anymore. So we just want to make sure that everything is tight and ready for their riding. We're going to check the tightness of our pedals. On all bikes, there's a right pedal and there's a left pedal. Because when you pedal your bike, you want to make sure that the pedal itself is not going to be untightening itself as you pedal. So to tighten them, what I like to do is position my pedal upwards and push up and over towards the front of the bike. On both directions, that is the case. Up and over, and make sure those are tight. If your child's pedal does come loose during their riding, this actually could cause damage to the internal threading of the crank arm. Not only could the pedal come out during a ride, it also could lead to needing to replace the crank arm entirely. Our bike is tuned up and ready to ride. We're actually gonna get things packed up and go for a ride ourselves. Be sure to check out our support page if you have any further questions or need support on anything in further detail. And again, can't stress this enough, connect with your local bike shop. They are going to be such a valuable resource to you. They are professionals and they know how to fix, maintain, and upgrade bikes. Don't forget to have fun, go forth, and adventure.